Welcome to the NonProfit Voice, a podcast series brought to you by NonProfit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we're going to sit down with leaders of nonprofit organizations, the people responsible for paving the way for our sector, along with key technology strategy partners who are transforming our industry. Here at the NonProfit Voice, we'll have refreshing conversations in which we will all learn more about the convergence of nonprofit and technology. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website to find more episodes of the NonProfit Voice. And you can download all of the NonProfit Voice episodes on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. We will have all the links down below. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the NonProfit Voice. I'm Natalie, Editor-in-Chief of NonProfit Pro, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And as always, thank you so much for joining us today. I have 3 guests waiting on the line with me, and I'm so looking forward to introducing them to you. So please join me in welcoming Natalie Wood, Director of Community Engagement of the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, Whitney Atteberry, Event Specialist for the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, and of course, Brittany Gray, Nonprofit Growth and Success Executive of Goodworld. Hi, ladies. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. So I'm so happy to have you guys on. But before we jump into today's topic, I usually get our audience a little warmed up to get to know you guys a little bit more and about the organizations that you guys work for. So let's start with you, Natalie. Tell us your background and how you found yourself at the food bank.
Absolutely. So I am, like you mentioned earlier, I currently serve as the Director of Community Engagement for the Regional Food Bank, but I started at the food bank as our Special Event Coordinator immediately following graduation from college. And it was special events and marketing, but through that, I fell in love with the development fundraising side of that job and progressed into a fundraising role, and then really found that fundraising is all about relationships. It's all about community, which is what landed me in the position I'm in now. But before starting at a nonprofit, I had always known that I wanted to do nonprofit type work. But to be quite frank, I grew up in a very small town, and I did not realize that nonprofit professionals actually got paid to do their job. So it wasn't until later that when I was in college that I realized that you can actually make a living and work at a nonprofit. And when I had the opportunity to start working in the nonprofit field, it was a no-brainer for me. And I hope to continue this work throughout my career.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Whitney, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I came to the nonprofit world right out of college as well. So I started as an intern for the Regional Food Bank as a summer feeding intern, and I was going to college for nutrition and dietetics. So I was really looking to experience that side of food, and I had no idea about food insecurity and how it was in the state that we live in, which we're in Oklahoma, by the way. So it really opened my eyes, and it made me want to make a difference and use my knowledge to make a great impact. And so I got on at the Regional Food Bank through the volunteer coordinator position, and I've grown into the event specialist.
Great. And last but not least, Brittany, tell us about yourself.
So like most nonprofit professionals out there, I've worn many, many hats over the years. I actually started as an environmental educator back in my home state of Florida. And as I followed that calling around the country, I got more and more involved in fundraising to support those programs and organizations that I was working with. So fast forward a decade or so, I won't put an exact number on it, I now put my knowledge and experience to use helping Goodworld's nonprofit community thrive.
Excellent. So it seems like we have a lot of experience between the 3 of you today. And it's funny because I feel like I say this on every single episode, that nonprofit is never the destination. It's usually a long and windy path. And I think, I mean, it pays off because when people are in it and they're working in it, they love it and they have so much passion and so much admiration for it. So they do good work, which I'm seeing from all three of you. All right, so I brought everyone on the line today to chat about the rise of corporate partnerships. So for the remainder of this conversation, you, our audience, can look forward to hearing more about what corporate partnerships are, tips for finding corporate partners, types of corporate partnerships, and so much more. So let's get into my first question. And, we want to start with the basics here. And Whitney, I'd love for you to kick us off here and talk about what corporate partnerships are for nonprofits.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to me, it's really when the corporation as a whole chooses to support the mission of a nonprofit. But it's also when they encourage their employees to get engaged and get involved with the nonprofit organizations to help support that mission as well. So it's almost like there's two different lines of engagement there. There's that corporate level, but there's also that employee level that you can tap into.
I mean, I think I would just echo, Whitney, what you said as far as corporate partnerships for a nonprofit. For me, corporate partnerships go beyond just your financial giving. So like you mentioned, the corporate level. So you've got corporate dollars coming into the food bank. Their leadership is behind it, etc. But that next level, that next step, when they go to engage their employees directly into our mission, and it is ingrained through volunteer opportunities, through skilled-based volunteer opportunities, when they can offer up some of their expertise and to help push forward our mission. And that to me is kind of what explains a corporate partner, a good corporate partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And Brittany, coming from do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, so like Whitney and Natalie said, corporate partnerships have a lot of different facets. And I found working with our community that they can look completely different from one nonprofit to another and one business to another. It really just depends on what the goals are and what the mission of the organization is, what the size is, their volunteer capacity, their need in general, if it's people or funds or anything of that nature. So it can look wildly different from one to another. I do want to say, though, I have been really impressed with a lot of our nonprofits in this last year. I know that everyone is tired of hearing about COVID, but I just have to say, and it's going to sound weird, but thanks to COVID, we have seen so many new and creative things that nonprofits and companies have done to help support one another in these just unprecedented times. So historically, a corporate partnership would look, like Whitney and Natalie were saying, you have your sponsorships, your volunteers, you may have some employee giving going on, some in-kind contributions, depending on what services or equipment even are needed. But lately we've seen some really fun things like, spare change sponsorships instead of doing a bulk contribution, because some smaller businesses can't do that anymore, or at least not at this time, hopefully in the future, in the very near future. And then also some really fun things like these lovely ladies at the regional food bank have done one of my absolute favorite fundraisers of late, where they actually had local TV personalities start fundraising, and each dollar that they raised was actually a vote to have them kiss a pig, something silly where folks can really get involved, donors and fundraisers and the corporations or companies that are involved with these organizations who are doing such great work. So it's been a very exciting time to see the evolution of corporate partnerships and kind of the expansion of what those mean and what they can be.
Excellent. And if I can add on to that a little bit, because you're absolutely right, Brittany, we've had as a nonprofit to totally shift our thinking, like that the Kiss a Pig fundraising event that you mentioned, it is historically done in person at our state fair, and we had to identify a way to continue doing that this year. And thankfully we had the resources to be able to put that as an online giving campaign. to where the community could still participate and that media partner could continue their corporate partnership with us. So you're absolutely right. Flexibility from both the corporate side and the nonprofit side has been pivotal this year.
Yeah. COVID definitely has forced nonprofits and I think every organization to be more creative in how they strategize and how they pull off fundraising campaigns. And I think that's a really fun way to get people involved and continue the annual tradition, right? And so, I mean, corporate partnerships are becoming more of a strategy or a priority for nonprofits. We actually did our annual leadership study recently that found that the top priority for nonprofits going to 2021 is engaging in more corporate partnerships, which I think is really fun and really great. So I want to talk about, you know, how corporate partnerships benefit nonprofits and obviously to the corporate partners as well. Brittany, do you want to kick off this question?
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that corporate partnerships are kind of a priority for a lot of nonprofits going into this year. Corporate partnerships can really be every other bit of your fundraising strategy, but just focused on one particular group of people. So what I mean by that is, a lot of nonprofits, when they look for a corporate partner, they're looking for, as I mentioned, they're not only finances, but they can be looking for volunteers. They can be looking for support, all these different things. Even just visibility is a huge, huge benefit of corporate partnerships. So if you're partnering with a larger company, you automatically kind of have this captive donor base if it's an exclusive partnership. And even if it's not, you still get visibility to their employees as individual donors. So corporate sponsorships and partnerships can be part of an individual donor strategy. They can be part of an annual giving strategy, in addition to the more traditional sponsorships and even volunteer recruitment and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits to nonprofits. It really depends on, again, the nonprofit, the mission, what their needs are, and then also what those companies need and what they're looking for. Because with the right company as a partner, the company can actually get a lot of those same benefits, oddly enough. So you'll find they get a positive public perception. So how the nonprofit gets that visibility within the employee base, nonprofits also get that visibility within the community. They get credibility for partnering with large companies. They get that just that really positive boost of exposure, which can help with donor recruitment and donor retention. But again, so companies can get those same benefits by having a positive public perception inside and outside of the company, increased visibility, and that can also lead to an influx of business. So that can be a financial gain for the company as well. It just really depends on the partnership. And I know that a lot of times with these kinds of partnerships, there's also a lot of fun involved, right? So you're doing fundraising, you're supporting a cause that oftentimes is just really positive, and it's a way for your employees to bond within the company. And it's also a really great way to kind of have some interaction between the nonprofit employees and the company employees. So there's a lot of relationship building, a lot of kind of intangible benefits that we can see from different types of partnerships. And I know that Natalie, Whitney, you're going to have a lot to add to this because they are just pros at engaging their corporate partners. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you guys.
That was great, Brittany. Thank you so much for kicking that off. I think you hit some great points. I think so when a for-profit company partners with us, or I mean a nonprofit, there's just multiple layers to getting involved there with starting to cultivate that relationship. So it could be, as Brittany said, it could be through volunteering. As an example, some companies require so many volunteer hours. Now, that looks a little different with COVID, but we typically have a lot of corporations come out because they're required to fulfill so many volunteer hours. And that brings those employees to get involved with nonprofits. And that could just be the start of that relationship. So They could also enter through participating in a food and fun drive or through attending one of our nonprofit events, all of which lead to long-term relationships with that nonprofit and for-profit corporation. I feel like this also leads to those individual relationships that are not only with the corporation, but with the employee. So they come in to volunteer and hear about a donation campaign that inspires them. They want to get involved, and that leads them to not only being a volunteer, but now they're a donor of that organization. So there's just several different entry points for profit companies and nonprofit organizations to kind of collaborate together.
Awesome. Natalie, do you have anything to add?
I do. A story comes to my mind. So we have a hospital here in Oklahoma City who has decided that they wanted to do something for the regional food bank during the pandemic. And they are engaged with us on other levels through making sure, for our cause, hunger is the root of a lot of things. And if, we have wonderful partnerships with our healthcare providers because, health-related conditions and food insecurity can be widely connected. But this hospital reached out and said, hey, we want our employees to get involved. We would like to host a food drive, and Whitney so graciously worked with them and worked with them on a food drive, but also what we call a virtual food drive. And coincidentally, we use Goodworld for that type of online fundraising campaigns. But I'll never forget this story. And I wasn't on the receiving end of this call, but even just hearing of it resonated with me. And we had an individual call, and she just wanted to know a little bit more about the regional food bank. And she found us because her company, which was this hospital, was hosting a online giving campaign, and they had asked their employees to donate. And she said that it had been on her heart to make a donation because it's been a very rough year for her. And she opened up to Whitney that in addition to being furloughed from her job at the beginning of the pandemic, her mom had also passed away, and she had just been through a lot of other hard things that I think each of us listening to this podcast can think of somebody, or maybe even ourselves, that this year has been a little less than fantastic. And she had, because of her mom's passing, had come in to a little bit of money, and she didn't want to just keep it for herself. She wanted to donate it. And so she talked with us about our mission. And at that day, she got off the phone and she made a $3,000 donation. And we looked into her. It was a first-time donor of the regional food bank. And a few weeks later, I don't even know if it was a few weeks, she called back again just to tell Whitney, thank you for explaining your mission to me. It means a lot. And I know that it is providing food for people in the community. Turns out she made a $4,000 donation after that. So from this relationship that was started for a for-profit hospital, an individual was connected to our mission. And we were able to help her do good in her community. We were that go-between where she wanted to do something for the community, and we happened to be the nonprofit that could help her with that. So when I hear this question, or how these types of partnerships, how do they benefit nonprofits and for-profit companies? I just told you how it benefited our organization. We're able to feed so many people with the $7,000 that she ultimately gave. But she now knows that her company cares about more than just what their work is. And it allowed her to get connected to a mission because of the corporate partnership that we had. And so I think it goes beyond just, Brittany brings up a wonderful point. Many corporate partners absolutely love, and I would love if I was a corporate partner, the positive publicity that comes from it. But they're also allowing a vessel for their employees to be bigger than themselves and do something that's bigger than themselves. So to me, that is the benefit.
What an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's just a perfect example of the kind of rise of philanthropy in the corporate sector. You know, when people work for corporations, for businesses, for profit businesses, they are now looking for businesses and corporations that are giving back to their community. And this is just like a wonderful story. So thank you again. All right, great. So Brittany, I would love to bring you back on and share what your recommendations are for how nonprofits can begin to find corporate partners. I think the big question for a lot of nonprofits is how they can properly engage a business that they're interested in partnering with.
Yeah, that is absolutely the ultimate question. How do you find them? How do you engage with them? You know, and what does that relationship look like? So finding them is the hardest step, right? You got to go out there, you got to look, you got to do your research. I cannot recommend enough to just kind of, if you have a few extra minutes in your day, do a little Googling, see what's out there, see who is announcing their intentions and their values and their priorities when it comes to corporate social responsibility, especially in the last year or so. That's become such a huge part of what companies are putting out into the world is, you know, what they value and what they care about and what they support, because consumers more and more are realizing that what a company stands for is so important to them, because whenever they're making a purchase, they're kind of making a statement with that purchase, and brands are realizing that as well. And so going out there and seeing who is interested in what and who is kind of putting their priorities out there is just the biggest first step that you can possibly take. And then finding groups of people who kind of self-identify in that regard. So for instance, the group 1% for the Planet. It's a group of companies and individuals and brands even that have gotten together, and they all make this pledge to donate 1% of their profits back to organizations, nonprofits who are supporting the planet, the environment, sustainability, conservation, all those kinds of things. So finding those groups, reaching out to folks, because that's the other thing, you know, like they say in fundraising, if you're not asking, you're not going to be getting any of those donations. So you need to go out there and you need to ask them, which is of course the next really important step when it comes to engaging those folks, is making sure that you're tailoring that ask to what their priorities are, that you're engaging them in ways that matters to them. And a big part of that is listening. So if you can get in touch with somebody, that is huge. You can find out what they want to do and what their participation looks like when it comes to supporting an organization. Do they want an employee giving program? Do they already have one that you can get involved with? Are they looking to have different organizations that they can recommend their employees contact about volunteer hours, like Whitney mentioned earlier? Those kinds of things are very important. So listening to them once you do find them. And a really big part of both of those as well can be reaching out to your network, whether it's folks you already know, like your board members, your advisors, even your staff members and volunteers. Those are all great resources for finding connections to companies, and particularly ones that have a connection to your mission. So again, whether that's a stated value or a product that they produce or a resource that they use, all of those are great inroads for finding and connecting with those companies, and then figuring out kind of the best ways of engaging them. And of course, providing them with options is another really great strategy for engaging them, letting them know what you have to offer them. And as far as, you know, what their employees can get involved in or what they can do as a company, and making sure that it's straightforward and easy. Those are also very important points. You want to make sure you outline those things, because having anything as a gray area or anything that's unclear, that is kind of the first misstep that can be made in forming these kinds of partnerships. So being direct, communicating, and making sure there's a good fit. Those are all really good best practices that you can follow.
Fantastic. Those are great pointers. And I think this, you know, engaging corporate partners, I think it can be like engaging donors or using kind of the similar tactics. All right, great. So Natalie or Whitney, do you have any, little nuggets of wisdom from your experience?
Yes, I actually do. And it so closely relates to what Brittany said, and finding those connections. And I just want to share a little bit of advice that we did that helped us out. We actually asked our corporate partners to ask their vendors and other corporate partners to join our efforts. And so we leveraged those that are already bought in and excited about our mission to say, hey, other business that we work with, we support the regional food bank through these avenues, and we think you should too. So when it's coming from someone that's not necessarily your nonprofit professional, but you're equal in the community, I guess you could say it that way, sometimes people are more apt to listen. And so it's, finding those connections is so important. And I like to think of it this way, Brittany. You said make it easy. What came to my mind when you said that is no one likes clunky. No one likes to have to click through many different things or try to piece together a puzzle that doesn't work. So anytime we make an ask or do our cultivation, we try to make sure it is as clear as it can possibly be.
I love what you said there, Natalie. To kind of harpen on that, I think to look at that detail is I see us as the connectors between the business and the organization. So between the profit and the nonprofit. We don't make their giving about us. We turn it to see as the connection between the corporation and the organization's mission. So I feel like we are more of that vessel that makes it happen. So as a connector, you really strive to have that customer service, and we really value that side of not only engagement, but hopefully the beginning to a long-lasting relationship. So it's really about engaging that stewardship component, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Great. So moving on to our next topic, and this kind of goes into kind of piggybacks off this last conversation that we just had. What does a mutually beneficial partnership between a nonprofit and for-profit look like? In other words, how can a nonprofit ensure it's getting into the right partnership and they're just not diving into any one that becomes available? Natalie, do you want to kick us off here?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question, because my goodness, is it relevant to the work of a nonprofit? I'm going to be brave in saying that as a nonprofit, you have got to really be, I'm going to say it, you've got to be picky about what you will and you will not allow a corporate partner to do. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier on a benefit of corporate partnerships being the publicity that they may be able, the positive exposure that they may be able to reap from their support with you. And there are, and I'm not saying at the organization that I'm currently at, but that organizations that I've been at before have had toxic corporate partnerships. And it's that, hey, we'll give you this money, we'll donate our time if you do this. And you almost start to get, you do, it's not an almost, you start to get into a little bit of ethics at that point. And so to me, mutually beneficial partnership between a nonprofit and a for-profit is that the nonprofit, for the nonprofit side, they are not having to compromise their mission at all in order to do their work, and that corporate partners still support them. They're not having to add extra layers, lessen the efficiency, etc. And that they are able to have the trust and guidance, I guess you could say, to say, you're the one that walks out this mission, you're the one that does it, I trust you with our resources, so go out and continue doing what you do. For a for-profit company, what does that benefit look like to them? I think that we do need to thank people. We do need to thank corporations when they go above and beyond and do things. It shouldn't be expected. And I like this saying of, it's always great to under promise and over deliver. And by that, I mean, if we normally think a corporate partner through a social media post, maybe we thank them through a social media post and follow it with a video that really dives into the creative work that they do and talk about how creative they are, and not just focus on the financial gift that they gave, or et cetera. So to me, as a nonprofit, we can't allow toxic relationships into the work that we do, because it ultimately hurts our mission. And we just have to make sure that we continue to think corporate partners in a way that we can feasibly do. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I couldn't agree more. We don't, as nonprofits, I know the work you guys do is so important, but also your resources are limited. So you would never want to compromise the organization for a corporate partner, right? So you have to be a little more smarter and a little more strategic. So I love your honesty. But Whitney, did you have anything to add?
I think I just harpen what Natalie said. She really did a great job explaining it. You really have to kind of stand your ground, but you also have to be open to opportunity, to see what would benefit both the profit and nonprofit. What would work for both of you guys, but to have a positive relationship.
Definitely. And Brittany, you guys work with so many nonprofits. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there are so many different factors that go into defining these relationships. And that is something I can't stress enough, is actually defining them. So a lot of times you'll have some kind of informal, maybe one-off corporate sponsorships or programs that you do together, volunteer activities, things like that. But even with those smaller kind of interactions and shows of support, there still needs to be kind of an assessment done on that partnership, both, for the sake of both parties, so that everyone knows what success looks like, and they know what's expected of them, and they know what the outcomes are that they're looking for. So I kind of distill that down into kind of a checklist. So the first part of that is always, is there an alignment? So it's like what Natalie and Whitney were saying. You want to make sure that there is an alignment between the company and the mission of the nonprofit, because otherwise, what is the connection there? What is the purpose for this partnership? So you want to make sure that you're aligned. You also want to make sure that from that alignment that you're looking at a scope that is appropriate for your mission. You don't want to overextend. The whole purpose of this sponsorship or partnership is to support the work that you're doing, not stretch you too thin. You want to make sure you still have all of the time and the manpower to do the things that you are there to do. And these partnerships should support that, not put it in jeopardy. Of course, that leads us to my next point, which is feasibility, right? You got to make sure that it's possible to do these things. Like Natalie mentioned, it's definitely doable if you're promising the corporate sponsor that you're going to shout them out in a social media post. You can add that into your strategy for your social media for the next week or whatever it is. Like, that's definitely doable. But you want to make sure that you're not over promising. Right. So under promising, over delivering, I think that's great. It's an excellent philosophy. And a lot of us, I've definitely stretched myself too thin. So I'm also speaking from experience here. You want to deliver, especially as nonprofit professionals, you want to give everyone the world and be able to just really achieve everything. But we have to kind of take a look at what is possible and what is feasible and what aligns with what we're here to do. And then that kind of brings me to my last point here, which is defining success. So again, even if it is kind of an informal partnership, you want to make sure you at least have a discussion about what success looks like for that partnership, whether it's the time, if there's a link to that partnership, an expiration date to it, if there are any data points that need to be considered for this project to be a success or for this partnership to be a success. Things like that. So it can be a formal agreement, it can just be a discussion, but you need to make sure that you know what success looks like in order to ensure that your partnership with this corporation is mutually beneficial to you both.
Excellent. So Brittany, I want to keep you here for a little bit. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. You talked about the different kinds of corporate partnerships. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the details about each and which would be beneficial to nonprofits depending on what their goals are?
Absolutely. So that last part that you said there is definitely a really important piece that, each one is going to be different and the priorities are going to be different. But the cool thing is, especially right now with all of the different advances in technology, and I know that we're a little bit limited on in-person type stuff, but there's just a whole world of creative, interactive, and very inclusive ideas for events and sponsorships and things like that that are happening right now. So just to go through a few specific examples of types of sponsorships that we've helped facilitate here at Goodworld and that I've worked with over the last year or two. Sponsorships are definitely a big one. You have a corporate partner or small business or anything like that, and they want to come in and they want to support an event that you're running, or support your mission for a certain portion of the year or for a certain amount. So those financial gifts are absolutely very important to procure and to steward, and all of those good things like that. But there's also a lot of other creative ones, like doing e-card campaigns, for instance. I'm not sure if any of you saw those sorts of things going around at the end of the year for the holiday season. A lot of companies were partnering with nonprofits to make donations or to encourage their employees to make donations by sending around e-cards or sending a link out where they could make a gift to a nonprofit on behalf of somebody or on behalf of an employee if you're the employer. So those are really cool campaigns that were a little bit different, because typically you might have a physical card going around the office, and that wasn't really an option for a lot of people this past year. Payroll giving is another really important one. I'm so happy that we can be involved in some of those campaigns where we actually connect companies with several different nonprofits or with their one target nonprofit to collect donations from employees as part of their payroll. So it's a really great recurring giving program that supports a lot of really worthy causes out there. And it's really easy for the employers, which again is one of those very important pieces. In addition to kind of working with the nonprofits to get companies involved, we've also had the unique experience of operating kind of from the flip side of that as well. And so helping some companies run events and donate the proceeds from that to nonprofits that we work with. So kind of working from the CSR side of things or the corporate social responsibility side of things, and helping them connect with causes that align with their mission, and kind of look at things from that direction. So a lot of neat partnerships out there, and of course there's combinations of all of those things as well. So different ways to get involved, and different ways to connect people. It's been a really cool experience being involved with all that.
Great. So you did such a good job kind of breaking down each kind of partnership. And I'm curious, Natalie or Whitney, what types of corporate partnerships do you guys engage with?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brittany kind of hit all the great points. There's so many types of partnerships, but there's also so many ways to engage with a nonprofit. Goodworld has actually been a great tool for us. We have been able to roll out virtual food drives over the past year due to COVID, and we're just seeing our corporate partners are working their way towards engaging their employees through these virtual food and fun drives. So that's one of the large things. We also have a virtual volunteer program where you basically become this social media ambassador for our nonprofit organization. So you share our posts, we provide you with all of the post information, and it just allows them to tap into their resources and help spread awareness. So that's another great option. We've also had some online events, and just being able to spread awareness virtually has been so great, and has been another way for those corporations to really get involved with us. Natalie, do you have anything else to add to that?
I believe that you and you and Brittany really captured everything as far as the different type of corporate partnerships. I mean, we're a pretty large nonprofit organization in Oklahoma City, and so our corporate partners range from group companies of 500 plus employees all the way down to companies of maybe 5. And so our partnerships run the gamut of volunteerism, sponsorship. But one thing that I don't think I've come across that Brittany mentioned that I'm going to have to steal and borrow, is the digital card idea of the company running that. Of course, nonprofits have been doing that for a while. Send an e-card and make a donation to the nonprofit. But I like asking businesses to consider to do that. So thanks for that idea, Brittany.
No problem, Natalie.
I love it. All right, so we're running out of time, and we've talked about so much today. And I'd like to close out my podcast by asking our guests a very simple, but it's a hard question as well. With everything that we've talked about today, what's one piece of advice you would give nonprofits who are listening today? And Whitney, I can pass the torch over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think some advice I would give is just be adaptable, be a sponge to soak in all that information, and really be open to change. For the past year, a lot of us have seen the way we do fundraising for nonprofits has changed with everything we've had going on. So a quick example is we used to have an 800 plus person gala. We've had it for the past 33 years, and now we're just unable to do that. But we're also at a transitioning point to changing that entire event and what it looks like, and how it can make a greater impact, but still look a little different. So it's really made us put our thinking caps on, but it's an exciting change. So we've learned that we're just going to make mistakes, and that's okay. We're learning from that. We've asked our corporate partners, what they want from us, and it's really challenged us to think of the different options that we can offer them. And so I think that's really helped our organization grow. So really just be open to change is my good advice here.
Excellent. And how about you, Natalie?
Yep. So mine is don't be afraid to fail forward. And by that, I mean, I am a perfectionist. I wish you guys truly knew how much I hold myself to a high standard. And I have had to learn that we're not going to get it right every time. And that's okay, because you learn from those mistakes. And I see that as failing forward. My second advice is that a no isn't always a no. It could be a no right now, but maybe in the future. So don't be afraid when someone says, no, I don't think we want to engage with you right now. We can't make this financial gift. I always follow up. No, never, or just no right now. Mm-hmm. So fail forward and don't be afraid of the answer no.
Great. And finally, Brittany, what's your advice to nonprofits?
Well, I often find that our nonprofit clients and colleagues are lacking in confidence when it comes to asking these companies, whether it's a small business or a corporation, for their support. And the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is to remember that they need you too. So if you really make that case for how you can further their own personal or company-wide missions and things like that, like they need you as well when it comes to communicating to their clients and their customers and their employees why they deserve the business and the respect and the attention. So don't forget, they need you too. Be confident.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing. So we're about out of time for today, and that wraps it up for today's episode. I first want to thank our audience for listening on today's podcast. And of course, Natalie, Whitney, and Brittany, it's been so much fun having you on and talking to you both, or all three of you, about corporate partnerships. So thank you for joining me today on the Nonprofit Voice.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us today.
It's been fun. Thank you.
And so on behalf of Nonprofit Pro, we will see you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Nonprofit Voice. You can listen to more episodes of the Nonprofit Voice at nonprofitpro.com/podcast/the-nonprofit-voice. And remember, for your convenience, you can stream any and all episodes of the Nonprofit Voice on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify.